Welcome to another episode of the School Podcast. We are here again at the Education Forum event in London, and we've got a very special guest and somebody I've actually been watching on LinkedIn for a while. You don't know I'm watching you, but I'm watching you, okay? Adrian, how are we?
Very well, thank you, very well.
Thank you for making this happen. I know you're at the event, you've just seen the podcast with myself and Diana, but obviously you're at a networking event. If people say, what do you do? How would you describe what you do?
If I'm in the pub in the village, they tell me I'm a glorified administrator, which is a good one. I was a head teacher until 10 and a half years ago, Cameron. I was a head teacher for 14 years before that.
Wow.
So
Secondary?
Middle and secondary.
Okay.
So I did middle and I did exec head in secondary. So I've been a head or CEO for 24 years now. So it's a bit like Wayne Rooney. I was put out on the pitch at 16, so I was head at 35. So it's been a long time leading schools, but it's been great. Wouldn't change the job for the world.
How many schools are you responsible for?
We've got 18 schools in Chiltern at the moment, 14,000 children, 11 secondary, 7 primary.
Wow, amazing. I don't want to miss this question, so we'll touch on that in a second. What has changed over the 24 years, did you say?
Yeah.
What has changed in that time in education, or even in the UK? Has much changed in the UK? What are some of the biggest differences that you've recognised?
In terms of leadership, Cameron, the biggest difference is obviously the introduction of technology. That sounds really, strange, but 24 years ago when I was a head, people had to put a note in my box to get an appointment with me for the next day or the day after. There were no emails 24 years ago, and so that instant accessibility, I think, is a real strength / real problem for leadership.
Strength and problem.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because you have instant access, but you're not. Leaders have no downtime. I could go home at 6 or 7 o'clock knowing that I wouldn't be bothered until 7 or 8 the next morning. So, you had that 12 hours of headspace. Even if you were working at home, you weren't constantly on call. I think it's very different for new leaders. They're used to a culture now, Cameron, that they're accessible 24 hours a day via email or even via phone. In terms of schools, I think schools haven't changed massively in the 24 years I've been head and CEO. Some things for the better, some things less so. The pragmatism and lack of the different structures are very different. Don't forget 24 years ago, there was no such thing as trusts or academies. We were all local authority schools.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit different or very different. I think in the classroom, very little has changed in the last 24 years, I would suggest. Some things for the better. I think the focus on pupil premium, the focus on narrowing the gap, the focus on pedagogy is better. I think teaching and learning has improved in the last 25 years, so I'm positive about that. Some of the structural changes, I'm not certain have had the impact that we wanted.
So you said that some of your friends in the pub say that you're a glorified administrator?
Yep, that's the term. How
do you stay now as CEO, though? How do you remain connected to what's happening in your schools and to teaching? Like the very thing what made you. Yeah. How do you keep the students at the front or the staff or whatever your philosophy is? How do you remain true to what your mission is? So you're not a glorified administrator or just somebody who's running this enterprise or business or somebody who's dealing and managing money, really.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really good question, Cameron. And I'm asked that a lot because, if you look at the different sort of 3 or 4 strands of our trust, I probably spend more time with finance and HR than I do with the teaching and learning team. If I'm being really honest, and I would say that when I meet I think it's important because when I meet my senior team now, or even my head teachers, I'm way more skilled in finance and HR than most of my head teachers, but I would know that actually teaching and learning, they're going to be ahead of me now because I've not been a head for 10 years.
Okay.
So it is important to stay connected. Now, I do a lot of school visits. I mean, every Thursday I go around all of our schools, as in terms of every 3 weeks I go around on a Thursday, but I spend all my time in schools in effect, Cameron. I think that's really important. Last week's focus, for example, with the head teachers was I wanted to see the high tariff children. So we've got we're being told there's an increasing SEND crisis. So last week, when I was in our 6 Bedford schools on a Thursday, I said, right, I want to see those children. I want to spend time with those children. So rather than just going around the 6 schools and sitting with the head's office, I went and spent time with the children so I could feel those issues, and we have increased numbers in mainstream that children were perhaps in special schools 20 years ago. And I think that increased pressure makes it very stressful for staff. But, I think it's important that I don't just listen to those problems. I go and deal with those children and speak to them. They're not going to improve because I'm there, but my leadership will improve because I'm connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're feeling it's not just a problem that you're getting told about, you're feeling it as well.
Yeah.
And then that just, it breeds kind of change, doesn't it, for sure?
Yeah.
So what do you do then at the moment for yourself and your trust to avoid building an echo chamber?
Yeah.
So I see what you do, so I feel like I kind of know the answer, but how do you make sure that you don't develop an echo chamber where, some trusts are very much, we know how it is, this is our mission, this is our values, our way or no way. Mm-hmm. How do you develop a growth mindset, not just as a CEO, but as a trust and as a culture in your schools?
I think one thing is really important, that you are a big important cog in the community, Cameron. And I think once you start removing yourself from that community, I think that's a big mistake personally that trusts make. And I think
what's an example of removing yourself from the community?
But back to what you were saying about our way is right.
Okay.
And also we're not a cookie cutter trust. So, different solutions in different schools and different communities. Yes, we want that high level. We want our schools to be outstanding. We want that high level of professionalism, those high levels of interpersonal relationships, those strong human-centred leadership approaches that I think epitomise Chiltern, and strong teaching and learning and strong outcomes for children. We're not embarrassed to say that we want our schools to be outstanding and have high GCSE results and high GCSE results, but it's within a human-centred leadership way. And those things, I think, run through Chiltern. But when you stop listening to your community, or you don't engage with the community, or you have a very narrow focus, I don't get this thing, we're just here to educate the children. No, you're here as a head teacher to be part of the community. And, and I think if you look back at, without, you and I weren't about 100 years ago, but, you'd look back, who would have been the most respected people in the villages in this country 100 years ago? It would have been the head teacher, the vicar. Now I think actually head teachers have a big part to play in their communities. They're not just about the school, they are about that community. And at Chiltern, we make our central team go on governing bodies, we make them attend community events. Well, actually, they want to attend community events. Yeah. It's the best part of the job. And I think staying in touch with your community is vital, but also I think listening to your community. If we have someone criticise us, we invite them on to our governing bodies. And that was my first approach when I went to Luton, because Luton was very anti-academies. They'd had a couple of poor academy chains in there. And so when we had critics that academies do this or academies do that, we said, oh, no, come on, be on our governing bodies, come and see what our morals are. And I think it's always important that you do make yourself accessible. Some of the biggest critics, I've got my mobile phone, some of our biggest critics, and they'll think nothing of texting me, but you'll get a better response from me knowing that we'll work with them than I'll ignore them, and it's about listening to your community. And, my wage is paid for out the public purse. It's not paid for by a company, so therefore I'm accountable to that community.
That's something I hear all top leaders say, and that level of responsibility and that accountability and why you're in that role. Why did you want to go as far as becoming a CEO and have the impact that you have? Why was that important to you?
Part of it is just where you end up, Cameron. So why did I end up becoming a head of year and an assistant head? Because my football teams run everything when I was a PE teacher in the 90s. And I thought, actually, I'm not bad at this. I can motivate these kids.
Who is your football team?
That I support?
Yeah.
Oh, please don't ask on camera.
Was that United?
It's Man United, yeah.
But where are you from?
Well,
Where's the accent from? It's
It's
Wolverhampton.
not far from Staffordshire, right?
Okay.
And I was the only Man United fan in my school because Man United, see, I'm quite used to this current era because Man United were rubbish when I was young. So this is just going back to my childhood to me. And so I started, my cousin was a Man United fan. And when I was 6 or 7, Man United were actually in the 2nd division. And we played Wolves and West Brom and Birmingham and Villa in the what was then the 2nd division, they're the championship. And we played them and I went along and all the Glory supporters all supported Liverpool and Leeds.
Yep.
All the locals supported the Villa or Walsall or Wolverhampton. And I was the only Man U fan, and to me that made me different. And
yeah, but not anymore.
No, and then in the 90s, every kid that I taught was a Man U fan, and you know, and suddenly you everyone labelled me a Glory supporter. I supported them because I'd heard the Busby Babes story, you know, and I'd heard the European Cup '68 story.
I want to ask you a different type of question then. Have you ever read the book Good to Great?
No.
So is it Jim Collins? I think Jim Collins said. He said the difference between like a good leader and a great leader is when a great leader leaves an organisation, they leave it in a better place where it's going to strive, where they're going to strive forward. Yeah. So if you left now, you've built. It's not all based around you.
No.
So my problem with Sir Alex Ferguson is.
Yeah.
Was he as really no? But it's true. It's a leadership question. Was he truly such a great manager that when he walked away from the organisation, it's crumbled?
Yeah.
And they can't get back to it, and they still talk about him every single interview or whatever. So it's like, to me, it's like, okay, I get what he's done, I get the idea, but actually, was he really a great leader? If when he leaves, the place has crumbled. He's not left it in a better place. Where somebody like, I guess, I'm not massive football, but Klopp, Liverpool's improved since he's kind of left them. Yeah. Is that a true leader? Is that a great leader?
I mean, my predecessor is Dame Yasmin Bevan, and she's a good person. And when we were first setting up teaching schools in 2009, I was the leader that set up the Central Beds teaching school. Which is the next authority up from Luton. She set up Chiltern Training Group, which is the teaching school that I'm now in charge of. And we always say Yasmin's leadership is judged by the fact that Denby, the school that she was at, has gone from strength to strength to strength since she's left. So we always say Yasmin's leadership is measured by the fact that Denby, which is our base school for our trust, and when I started 10 years ago, we had 3 schools and it was based around Denby. Denby has gone like that. So we're saying that she built it on solid foundations. And when I left my headship, after 2 or 3 years, the school then wobbled massively. So I think individual schools do suffer by the point of a head teacher, but an organisation as big as our trust shouldn't. And somebody said to me very early in my headship, spend your first 5 years making yourself indispensable. Spend the next 5 years.
What does that mean?
Well, that you have to be central to the vision, central to the direction of the school, but then spend the next year, 6 to 10, making yourself totally dispensable. Because at that time, you're probably going to be leaving. So first 5 years, you've got to throw yourself in there and you've got to take it forward.
Buckle up.
Yeah, but then 6 to 10, you've got to make it. You know, I'm here today, my trust is running as well or better without me interfering. You know, my central office definitely like me being away, they can get on with their work. But, you know, you do have to make yourself dispensable after 5 years. You have to then say, well, look, like you say, how can that organisation stand without me there? If it's all about me or about Sir Alex, you know, the organisation will fall flat. You know, we're all going to get old and die. You know, that's the only reality, isn't it? But the fact that Chiltern is stronger 10 years after Yasmin left showed that she built it on strong foundations. And I agree with Sir Alex Ferguson. We thought he was a wonderful leader for 20 years. He goes and the whole thing has fallen apart. But the whole culture and ethos has fallen apart, hasn't it?
It makes you quite. It just makes it. I find it fascinating because I think there's a lot of similarities between sports and just everything that we do. Yeah. I think there's a lot of lessons there. So I was just because you're into football, I was curious to know what you think about that. So like, what is the vision to keep pushing you forward? Because you seem on LinkedIn and what you're doing, you seem passionate and hungrier than ever. And you do seem to put the children, actually staff as well. One thing that I see, you bring in your staff along and really what's the word? celebrating them.
Hi, I'm Iona from Edurio. We believe in the power of leading through listening, and we work with schools and trusts across England to conduct stakeholder feedback surveys to help you find out where you are now and where you need to go next on the things that matter most. Get in touch if you'd like to know more.
I was thought as a head, and now even more so as a CEO. I used to stand up and do parents' open evenings, and I used to say, my job is simple. I get the very best staff in for your children. And then my job is easy. And that's what I used to say. And I think, without trying to sound arrogant, I think my biggest strength is choosing the right people and for the right place for the right time. And at Chiltern, we've got some absolutely brilliant staff coming, and you'll see some of them on LinkedIn, and you'll see some of them on social media, and they're great at what they do. Now, there'll be other people that are equally good in other areas but won't be so visible. So, you look at, say, my two Pakistani sons, Sufyan and Amjad. They're brilliant at being outward facing. But today I've got Julian with me, who's our Director of School Improvement, who's the most intelligent.
Amjad, so I've got Amjad coming on the podcast.
Have you? Oh, good luck.
What's the date? 26th, I think. 26th is our next one at home.
Yeah. And Amjad is brilliant, he's inspirational, the best trainer you could put in front of staff.
Yeah.
And they'll feel good about teaching. Sufyan will make people think. He's the best networker I've ever worked with. He's the best outward-facing person I've ever worked with, best link with the community. But, Sufyan, and he won't mind me saying this, Sufyan was a head of department, head of business studies, when I appointed him 8 years ago. He's now third or fourth in charge of Chiltern Learning Trust with 16,000 children. But 7 or 8 years ago, he was head of business studies in a sixth form college. And so, but I saw that nugget of something special in there, and we've got him there, and he does an absolutely brilliant job. His rise is nothing to do with me, but I did identify him.
Yeah.
And Amjad, similarly, is a brilliant trainer. I've added nothing to it, but he works 2 days a week for me, and that culture, he reflects Chiltern's culture when he goes out. And he's doing a brilliant bit of work on human-centred leadership to all our heads and all our SLT, looking at how those relationships work and matter. And then you'll have other people that are just damn efficient, that don't take I'm quite happy for Sufyan and Amjad to have the headline, and have the headlines and be above me and be famous. That's great, that's their job. But they are to promote that Chiltern culture, and we've got other people. And I think it's working through your people. I'd spend less and less time with children, unfortunately, and
nature of the job.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and we were at a dance competition last week, and
did you win?
It was an into one, so we were all,
weren't you there?
No, we were all winners. No, I was not, Cameron. No, even after a few pints, I would not be up there anymore. But we had 10 schools come along to our Chiltern dance competition, and the interaction with the children was absolutely brilliant. And I miss that. I still miss it, but my job, my satisfaction has to come out of motivating staff.
There's one person you could sit down with, dead or alive. Doesn't have to be famous. For one conversation, have food with. Who would that be?
Question.
Some would argue that's a great question.
It's a great question. Adolf Hitler.
Interesting.
He's abhorrent, and he's probably the most, the most evil man of the last century. I'm not going to disagree with that. He persuaded a country to follow him, and you look back and he was evil, and the rise of the far right in this country. I think there are similarities, Cameron. I think that the thought control, the mind control, the playing to the lowest common denominator, that non-white people equals bad people. I think there's some real common denominators. But he got that country behind him, and they weren't all not very bright in Germany. He got a lot of bright people to follow him, and I just want to understand how his evil mind worked. Really,
So, I get what you're saying. So that leads me on to, I guess, tell me if I am wrong. But obviously you work in Luton.
Yeah.
Obviously you hear a lot about Luton.
Yeah.
Those minds we just discussed.
Yeah.
But also Luton, as far as I'm aware, is very diverse.
Extremely, yeah.
Is there a challenge, pardon me, in the schools in Luton, or is it just the media that we see, or is it a big issue and a challenge that you have to face on a daily basis? That far right minds, I guess, because as you've just said, I know Luton to be very diverse, but at the moment you can't drive down any road without seeing an England flag or whatever, and obviously everything what's going on with the marches in London, things are changing at the moment. There's a not a very nice feel about what's in the air. So how is that for you, managing that, understanding it? Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, it's again a good question, great question, Cameron. So there's 2 or 3 bits to the answer. One, I think there was a bit of media hype, a lot of media hype about Luton. Secondly, Luton is so diverse, actually it's a bit more mature. So if you look at places like Bedford, Stevenage, close by, actually there's a lot less racial tension in Luton because it is so diverse. Actually, it's much more mature. So I live a third of the way between Bedford and Luton, and they're not dissimilar towns now. And probably they were different 30 or 40 years ago, but Bedford and Luton are probably pretty similar now. Socioeconomic and Luton is a lot better educationally, for example. But what you find is, Cameron, genuinely mean this, there's actually a much more of an understanding and an acceptance of working together in Luton than there perhaps is in places like Bedford or, less so places like Hitchin but say Dunstable, for example. That Luton is much more comfortable in its own skin. So therefore, last year or 14 months ago, when we had these stupid, issues going on with the hotels and the whatever, and that they were going to go to certain places and march on them, that was never going to happen in Luton. They wouldn't have taken Luton on because they're quite comfortable. But people say, but they're my friends, and this bit that. Why would you do it? Whereas in Bedford, it was threatened and it nearly happened and it was stopped at the last minute. All this nonsense that Muslim and non-Muslims don't work together. You can look at my LinkedIn account. If I go to a community event, a third of the people I'll be sitting on the table with, perhaps half, will be Muslim. And then my friends, I've chosen to go out with them. I'll go out in Berry Park. Sometimes I might be the only white face, but do I ever feel intimidated? No. So actually there's a maturity about the system that isn't reflected, and again, and obviously you have seen the podcast and you've seen Tommy's homemade videos that white and black don't speak or white and brown don't speak. That's absolute nonsense. Actually, I don't ever feel intimidated. I mean, after this summer's nonsense, did we meet as a group of chairs of governors and heads to say, look, how will it affect the children? Yeah, we did. I went and interviewed 2 or 3 of the school councils. After the march, I went in on the Monday and said, right, school councils, come and talk to me. Tell me what you think. And then approached
school councils
are students, yeah. I mean, I met a group of 2 of our schools are predominantly Muslim. They're in the Muslim part of Luton. We've got 6 of the 12 Luton secondary schools, and 3 of those are predominantly Muslim. 3 are very mixed. Actually, one of them is predominantly white, but 2 are quite mixed. But 3 of them are much more diverse, whereas 3 are, 95% Muslim. And I spoke to the children in the Muslim school, and they said their approach was so much more mature than our British media. To be honest, they just said, "Well, look, in America," I said, "What do you think?" When they said, Islam is not for Europe, and they said, "Well, first of all, it was an American lady saying it. It wasn't even anyone from England. Secondly, we thought it was hilarious, Mr. Rogers. We just laughed because they all sat and listened to that. And then they were queuing up outside the Indian restaurants later. And I said, it's just nonsense."
But one thing I like about your approach is that you're not just thinking or creating something in your own head and narrative and pushing it out. You're asking the students, and you're listening to the students, and I think that's an amazing way. Obviously, we need to go and grab some lunch in a minute, but I've got one final question. If you had a magic wand and could change anything in education, what would that be?
Funding. The funding has got tighter and tighter, and I think it makes it very difficult to deliver on the agenda that we're we're set out to. I feel sorry for our head teachers. I think I was a head teacher for 14 years, but I haven't been for 10 years. And I think they have it really tough with trying to deliver the agenda that the government wants for them. And I think everyone will say that funding doesn't mean good schools, but funding means you can do a lot. And I do think the most vulnerable of schools, the most vulnerable in society, get hit when the funding gets cut.
Thank you, Adrian. I appreciate it. There you go, guys. There's another school podcast. I will link Adrian's stuff all below in the description, his LinkedIn, also more information about his trust, and hopefully you can reach out to him. Obviously, you know the good stuff. Like, comment, subscribe, do all of that, and I will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
Access Education software is there for those busy school days, for the chaotic mornings when getting out of bed without a coffee can feel impossible. We're there for the multitaskers, for the cashless lunch payments, the fussy eaters, and the ones that always forget the school trips, the letters home and the countless emails. And we're there for the teachers, making sure everyone's paid accurately and on time. And we're no stranger to the world of education-related pensions. We're there for the time off, whether you choose it or whether it chooses you. We're here for those looking for the best, for those focusing on developing and empowering themselves and others, and for those looking to build their teams. We're there for those tasked with keeping the budget in check in challenging times, for those planning the recommendations to governors, for budget monitoring and those that need to report on adjustments throughout the year, for those planning the next budget and the next and the next, for the years to come. We're here for the information seekers, insight detectives, and real-time data warriors, for those that need accurate reports generated in minutes. We're here for the children, for those that want thousands of award-winning, easy-to-digest learning videos across more than 30 subjects in multiple languages, for the anxious exam takers, and for every single person that wants to make education great. Once the school day is done, we'll still play our part. We're still there for updates and to keep parents informed, and for those homework assignments and all-important grade boosts. We're still there for the governor meeting and the parents' evening, the after-school clubs and the extracurricular classes. And as for the hard-working teachers and staff, we're here, hoping you can find a little extra time in the evenings to unwind. So when the day comes to an end, teachers, parents and children across the land can rest easy, knowing that Access Education software will be there tomorrow to lend you a hand. Access Education, giving you the freedom to put education first.